Your shower feels so normal that you almost don't see it. You turn a handle, hot water appears, dirty water disappears, a private room is already waiting for you. 10 minutes later, your day continues. For us, that barely feels like technology. Historically, it's outrageous, because for most of human history, a real bath was not just a quick act of hygiene. It could take fire, water, labor, space, time, and cleanup. In other words, bathing was not just something you did, it was something you had to make happen. And that changes the whole question. Most people ask, did people bathe before modern plumbing? That's too simple. The real question is, what counted as bathing? How often could ordinary people do it? And how much effort did clean actually cost? Because no plumbing did not mean no bathing. It meant bathing lived inside a completely different system of effort. And once you see that, the modern shower starts to look less like a basic habit and more like one of the strangest luxuries we treat as normal. First, let's get rid of the biggest myth. People before modern plumbing did not just give up and live in permanent filth. That version of history is lazy. Many societies cared deeply about bathing and cleanliness. The Roman world had large bath cultures. In the Middle East, hammams became major public institutions. Even in medieval Europe, people washed hands and faces, used basins and cloths, visited bathhouses, and thought seriously about what it meant to keep the body presentable, healthy, and socially acceptable. So the issue was never simply whether people cleaned themselves. The issue was how. Because to us, bathing means a very specific bundle of things. A dedicated room, water on demand, heat on demand, privacy on demand, drainage on demand, and almost no physical work. For most ordinary people in the past, that bundle did not exist. And once that bundle disappears, the experience changes immediately. Start with the most obvious part. Water. Not just having some water, having enough water, enough to wash your whole body, enough to make the experience worthwhile, enough to do it without turning the rest of the household upside down. Then, add the harder part, heat. Cold water is inconvenient. Hot water is infrastructure. Today, hot water lives invisibly inside pipes, heaters, valves, and walls. Before that system existed, hot water had to be created manually. Someone had to fetch water, carry it, heat it over a fire, bring it over, pour it, and keep the room warm enough that bathing didn't feel miserable. That is the hidden reality modern people tend to miss. The problem was not just getting wet. The problem was assembling the conditions for a tolerable bath. And those conditions were expensive. Expensive in labor, expensive in fuel, expensive in time, expensive in household coordination. That's why a full-body bath was often not a casual daily act for ordinary people. It could be occasional, prepared, and very deliberate, not because people were too primitive to care, because the cost was real. And once you understand that cost, a lot of historical behavior stops looking strange. If a full bath takes a lot of setup, then daily cleanliness shifts into smaller, more targeted forms. That is where many people in the past actually lived. Not in no cleaning, in selective cleaning. Hands, face, neck, feet, a basin, a cloth, a quick wash. A sponge bath instead of full immersion. That kind of cleaning makes perfect sense in a world where water is handled physically, heat is limited, and indoor privacy is not guaranteed. And this is where the modern imagination often goes wrong. We imagine only two options: daily modern shower or total filth. But that is not how most real human life works. People adapt. When one kind of cleanliness is expensive, they build another. So for many households, cleanliness was not necessarily about soaking the whole body all the time. It was about managing the body practically and repeatedly using the tools available. And that changes the feel of the entire subject, because now we are no longer picturing some vague, dirty past. We are picturing a very physical world, A tub brought out when needed, steam near the fire, cold air away from it, buckets on the floor, wet cloth, heavy water, a room doing double duty, washing happening where heat could be found, not where privacy was ideal. That is a completely different relationship to bathing. Not automatic, not invisible, not frictionless. A bath could shape the room. It could take over part of the day. It could involve preparation before and cleanup after. It could feel practical rather than relaxing. And that leads to another important point. Being clean did not always mean what it means to us. Modern people tend to define clean very directly. Water hits skin, soap happens, dirt goes away. But in earlier periods, cleanliness could be understood through a different mix of medicine, habit, appearance, and fabric. In parts of Europe, especially after changing medical beliefs and fear of disease, full immersion in water could even be viewed with suspicion. If skin and pores were thought to protect the body, then opening them too much could seem risky, so people did not stop caring about cleanliness. They reorganized it. Skin could be wiped, hands and faces could be washed, hair could be maintained and fresh. Linen became deeply important. That matters more than it sounds, because clean clothing was not just decorative. It signaled order, discipline, and bodily care. A fresh white collar or sleeve could tell the world that a person was keeping themselves properly. To us, that can sound strange, but it reveals something important. Cleanliness is never just biology. It is also culture. It depends on what people think the body is, what danger is, what comfort is, and what a respectable person is supposed to look like. That is why bathing history is more interesting than it first appears. It is not just the history of dirt. It is the history of labor, privacy, belief, and comfort. And once those pieces change, bathing changes with them. That is exactly what happened in the modern world. With piped water, drainage, indoor heating, water heaters, dedicated bathrooms, and modern sanitation systems, bathing stopped being a household event and became a personal routine. That shift is easy to underestimate, because we were born inside the finished version. But the finished version is incredibly recent. The private daily shower is not some timeless human default. It is the result of layered systems doing hard work behind the wall so that you do not have to. That may be the real story here. Modern plumbing did not just make old bathing faster. It changed the nature of the act itself. Before, getting fully clean often required assembling resources. Now the resources wait for you. Before, heat had to be produced for the moment. Now it is standing by. Before, water had to be brought in and taken out. Now, both happen almost instantly. Before, bathing could borrow space from household life. Now the house gives the act its own room. Before, a bath might be memorable. Now it is so easy that it disappears into routine. And that is why this topic lands so hard once you really think about it. Because something you experience as simple, private, and obvious is actually built on an enormous amount of hidden support. Your shower is not just water. It is infrastructure. It is energy. It is engineering. It is labor removed. It is time compressed. It is discomfort prevented. It is a whole chain of problems solved before you even wake up. So what was bathing really like before modern plumbing? Not one thing everywhere. Not one answer for every century or class or place, but for ordinary life. The clearest truth is this. Bathing used to require much more of the world around you. More fuel, more effort, more planning, more handling, more compromise, more tolerance. The modern shower collapses all of that into one quiet turn of the wrist. And once you notice that, you start seeing the same pattern all over modern life. A lot of the things we call basic are not basic at all. They just hide their complexity well, and few rooms hide it better than the bathroom.